Hey, welcome to my channel. I am Dr. Sharice. I help Black men and women heal from trauma and toxic relationships. Today, I'm doing a book review on Queenie, which was recently made into a Hulu series. I haven't watched the series, but I read the book, duh. And I wanted to talk about self-esteem, people-pleasing, trauma, healing, toxic families, generational trauma, all the things. I have a lot of notes. I think there are some gems from the story that can help a lot of women, Black women in particular. I think the only thing I don't get, right? I recently had a prospective client ask me if I identify as a Black woman. I do, but I thought it was a great question because there are Black women who don't identify as Black women, right? They don't understand the challenges or anything like that. There is in this book, and I'm not gonna talk about it a lot beyond this, it's set in the UK. I think saying I'm a Black woman means things, right? We have a lot of sub definitions for being a Black woman. In the book, there is a lot of talk about the struggle of being a Black woman and how hard it is being a Black woman. And you know, the character is of Jamaican descent. She wasn't born there, but her parents are from there, still have the accent. Being that I was raised in the Caribbean, I think my identification with being a Black woman is different. And there are some things that I'm still ignorant to. Not still ignorant to. There are some things that don't hit as hard if it happens to me in real life, right? So if I'm racially profiled or you know, someone doesn't think I'm a doctor because of the way I look, it's hard to take it personal. It's hard to feel offended for me. And I think mostly because I didn't grow up with any racialized discriminations or anything like that. So when it happens, I'm just like, y'all wild. Y'all like, ugh. Like y'all are racist, right? Like America was built on racism, and so it's just hard to take it personally. And so I also don't internalize the struggles of Blackness. I acknowledge that they exist, but there is nothing about Black or being a woman that will stop me from doing what I want to do. And I don't think that has anything to do with being Caribbean. I think that mostly has to do with my mindset. They call it a growth mindset, an abundance mindset. I could do whatever I want. I could do whatever. And so our character is like the opposite of me in that she doesn't really view herself as having agency. And a lot of that was because of the trauma, emotional abuse that she experienced at the hands of her stepfather, I don't think he ever hit her, at the mouth of her stepfather, who her mother never ever defended her from. And then there's also the witnessing of domestic violence, physical abuse that she saw between her stepfather and her mother. And then she said in the book, who's the book written by? And then she said in the book, the author, but through the character talking, that once her mom moved out from living with her husband, she was married to the guy, and so it was just her and her mom again. Somehow her mom ended up back with the guy, and when she was 11 years old, like she lived in an apartment by herself, which is illegal. But it reminded me of some of the things that my clients have shared with me, in that it's so specific, it's and so abusive, so toxic, and so long lasting that I basically lived alone because my mother wanted to engage in this toxic relationship. She picked this man over me and never defended me against him, like ever. And I felt so small, and I was ignored and neglected emotionally. That has long-lasting effects on an adult. And so if there are no interventions in place from a mental health professional, I expect lots of problems, which is kind of what Queenie had, lots of problems. So let's talk about her friends, her romantic relationships or trysts, and work, right? So there are 3 friends that are talked about in the book, mostly. I'm sure she has other friends, right? But this is not real life. It's all made up. One friend, Cassandra, who when I think about codependency, right, because that's one of the themes in the book, just really a dysregulation of emotion. The friend Cassandra does not seem like a good friend. In fact, she seems like a really mean friend. She seems like one of those people that keeps someone like Queenie around so that she can feel better about herself. The other friend, Darcy, who is Darcy, right? Darcy, who almost seems normal, but maybe in a controlling relationship. When they talk about the guy being 15 years older than her, and then you get snippets of some of the emails that she sent, and then she offhandedly mentions, oh, he hid my phone. What girl? Hide my phone. Just like, don't play with me, okay? Don't play with me. You know, talks about some of the problematic issues there, but then she also was giving savior complex. Like, she wanted to really go out of her way to help Queenie feel better and do better. So bordering on the lines of really, really good, supportive friend, this was also her coworker, to overly involved, trying to save her from herself kind of vibes, right? I'm convinced all of her friends are toxic like Queenie. And then the last friend, who was Cheska, I think, was Ugandan. I don't think born there, right? But family heritage. And this Cheska girl was just on and on about this. The man needs to have this, and he needs to have that, and he needs to take me here, and I'm wearing my designer, and can you believe he said this and did that and rolled up in this or that? And then you find out that she is poor. Why is she wearing like designer boots if her mom is working 2 jobs? They refuse to turn the heat on or the air on. I forget, was it cool or hot? They refuse to turn the central air on because of the cost. Girl, what are you doing? What are you doing? But I had lots of stories to share, and maybe that chaotic part of her life helped to distract from the reality of yelling at the money. What are you doing? Are you working? What are you doing? That's wild. That was really wild. So we go from toxic friends to, she also had a relationship. I think they were together 3 years with a white man. Somehow she associated black men with her abuse. So she doesn't date black men at all. Okay. Doesn't date black men at all. Only dates white men because she's so traumatized by her stepfather. Okay, who was also, I think, Jamaican. Jamaican, had a very strong accent. She mentioned like sometimes not being able to understand him and him making fun of her because he couldn't understand her. So she was with this guy named Tom. Tom sounded good. Like, he sounded interesting, stable, emotionally, like mostly as secure as most secure people are. He sounded really, really good. I don't think he viewed her as a challenge to fix, but I think he was intrigued with her. And then up until a certain point, I think he just didn't want to play the savior role anymore. And so I think the breaking point for him was when she messed up his mom's birthday party. She's quite reactive. So in the times when she's supposed to defend herself, she doesn't defend herself. But in the times when I think it's an ideology she's defending, like if someone is being racist towards her, she'll respond back to them about the racism versus here are some ways that you hurt me and I think I'm worthy and deserving of kindness, and so you should be nice to me. No, she'll focus on the idea of it versus the actuality of it. And so I forgot what she did. I'm not sure if they talked about what exactly she did at his mom's birthday party, but his grandparents or his uncle, somebody was racist, didn't like black people, kind of what I would expect for that generation. But she would make it a point to hammer in why it's wrong and which I'm not sure, girl, I'm not in white spaces, so I have no idea. I think I would just not be with a white man. I expect all white people to be racist, right? To have this idea that black is wrong and white is right. It's kind of like a people thing across the world. It's what I expect from people. And so unless you were trained not to have those ideas and to resist what society tells you, or you have purposefully unlearned racism and all of that negativity from society, I kind of, yeah, I think those are part of your biases. So why would I would only partner with a white man who either has really good boundaries with I'm already partnered, right? But I'm just saying, I would only partner with a man who was really, really educated, had good boundaries with his family. But I can't imagine myself spending all that time in white spaces where I'm often the only. I don't even know what that's like, girl. I did that once in my internship, and I wasn't even the only one. But like, why would I would do that for a time. I would do that to reach a goal. I don't know. Why would you? Is that part of what it's like, in England and stuff? Y'all just don't have. I don't know. Okay, that part I don't get. I feel like I would just rather be single than to be with white men, or I would just be with an ethnic white or other. In fact, well, let's get into her other relationships, which aren't really like, she hasn't had another relationship. This is the only guy she's been in a relationship with, and she was such a poor communicator of her feelings and had such emotionally reactive, right? She would give the silent treatment. She would lock herself in the bathroom. Like, she would just do all kinds of toxic things, and he would have a really hard time getting through to her. And then one day he said he had enough, so he was done. After that, she did what I would expect her to do before she was in a relationship. But often what a lot of women do when they've had trauma is avoid relationships, whether consciously or unconsciously. If you haven't been in a relationship and you're past your 20s, you've been avoiding relationships because there have been people who've been wanting and interested in you, and you've been rejecting them consciously or unconsciously. I would expect either that or to be, what's the right word for this? To not vet men properly. I would expect her to aim to recreate experiences where she can feel like she was in control earlier on, right? I would expect that earlier on. She did that after her breakup. She didn't really think it was a breakup until, oh my gosh, I was like, it was cringeworthy. The fact that she was not talking to this man for months. They said they were on a break, that they would reconvene in 3 months. 3 months turned into 6 months, and she's still thinking she's in a relationship, girl. They were on a break, but she was having lots and lots of one-night stands with lots of different men, unprotected. I thought unrealistic for them not to diagnose her with an STD, but the STD clinic was a big part. It was almost like a person in this book. So there was Pakistani. There was a Pakistani guy who was married. There was another man who was in a relationship. And then there were just these randoms. One guy who popped up often who engaged in some of the most violent, graphic sex that I've read. And I can only imagine, like, I would tell you all, I would probably do a whole video if I had experienced sexual trauma. I've never had anything close to physical or sexual violence enacted against me. I've heard lots and lots of stories, right? I've worked with kids and adults who've experienced trauma. It was a lot. And perhaps it was also a lot for me because I understood what was happening. I currently have clients who are working through not having one-night stands with men. And I could feel the pain of the character. I think the author did a really great job of describing the internal world and pain that would drive a woman to have unprotected sex with random men, violent sex with a man, and not just once, but like repeatedly, and then to have sex with men. She's only having sex with white men. To have sex with men and this Pakistani guy who objectify her. And not just as a woman and her body, because she's also described as plus size, who also racialize her body. It's so cringe. Some of the sex, I don't think there was any normal sex described. There was some sexual intimacy described between her and her boyfriend, but in general, I don't think there was any normal sex described. And then the issue of consent. I feel like this would be a good conversation about consent, because she consented. She didn't say no. She was an active participant, But when you think about what's happening in the mind, it's what a lot of women do, where they're just kind of going along. And because I invited him, or I made the plans, or I found him online, because she would pick up a lot of random guys from online, feel like you're the one in control, or you have the power, and so therefore you feel good in the moment. But then afterwards, like, you know you out here wilding, my girl. Oh my goodness. But one of the most realistic depictions of how a woman would use sex to feel powerful, when it's in fact doing the opposite to her, leaving her in an extremely vulnerable position, having engaged in random sex with strangers. We'll talk about work, and then we'll talk about her family. Her work life started to become affected by her difficulty managing her life without her boyfriend. She was late. She was not sharing good ideas. She's a writer for a newspaper or entertainment magazine or something. Not engaged. And then she had a panic attack. So then she's making herself ill, right? She can't focus on work. She's having all these problems. She's put on like suspension or something. Very realistic. I think that's very realistic. I would, I don't know what they have over there in England. Over here, I would recommend someone in that position to do FMLA, because you are so reactive, you need a break. And so if some of the systems that are in place would help, I would encourage you to get that sort of help. Her boss also sounded toxic. She had, in the end, her boss described some trauma or relationship, something with her family. The way her boss talked to her, listen, it's just, but because of where her self-esteem and self-worth is at, there's a lot that she takes from people when she deserves better. Oh my gosh, she deserves better. But Darcy is a friend at work who has helped her maintain employment or sanity while at work. So I like the way, the author described how she deteriorated at work. Okay, when it comes to her family, because her family is Jamaican, they don't believe in therapy. I hate that those two things are together, right? But a lot of older folks don't believe in therapy. In fact, her grandmother would often describe her own trauma, which was more like a relationship trauma, where she was in love with a man, but because she had a child at 14, another trauma, she had to leave the man she was in love with to go with her child's father, who had left, Jamaica to go to England to set up a life for them. But she often talks about the loss of it. And I'm okay now. I'm okay. Yet she raised a daughter that was in a physically abusive. And the abuse that they described, they didn't describe it happening, except like a couple instances. But they described the aftermath of like how, bruised and bloody she was from this physical abuse. Specific families raise children that are going to be in an abusive and definitely a physically abusive relationship. It's people with unresolved trauma. It's people with secrets fester, people who are not being transparent and forthcoming with what their experiences are, or talking about them in a nonchalant way, like, oh, you should be able to get over this too, because look at all the terrible things that happened to me, and I'm fine. When you're not fine. You're not fine. Her mom, who was addicted to the relationship. I don't know if the man was addicted to something else, but who separated eventually, was in a whole court process, wanted to improve her relationship with her daughter, but her daughter, having had a mother who would not stand up for her, who was also small in size and didn't feel like somebody who could protect her, understandably would want to maintain a level of distance from her. So it's interesting how they describe that relationship in the story, that mother-daughter relationship. I'm always intrigued by mother-daughter relationships and people who women who do not have good relationships with their mother, close relationships with their mother, because how sad, right? I'm very close with my mother. Love my mother. I think she's amazing. Not that we haven't had our difficulties, but there was nothing big enough to stop like the love or the communication. And like, I like her, right? I like her. I think she likes me as a person, really enjoys my company and talking to me. And to not have that, if you don't have it from your biological mother, I hope you at least have another mother figure that you can lay on her bosom and cuddle with and talk to and share things that you might not share with anybody else, because this is somebody who held you nursed you, cares for you. I don't know, there's just something about a mother's instinct and a mother's love. I think that's very important. So I was happy to see how that story, you know, their relationship played out. Her grandfather was one of those men who grunt. Have you heard of the men who just grunt? They don't really share anything, they just be grunting. But I like how he stuck up for her in terms of therapy. So he's like the silent, brooding type, but he encouraged her to go to therapy, and for her grandmother, his wife, to stop being so negative about it, which I could also see, right? To me, it's helpful when books are realistic. Why does that make me think of Game of Thrones and how traumatizing that book was? I like when books are realistic. I also like when books are idealistic, right? Because I really enjoy fantasy too. But I like when the stories make sense versus the way you describe this character, they wouldn't do that. Why you made them do that? Like, you just pull in stuff. Who helped you write this section? Because I'm obsessed with books, okay? I have a whole other video on just how I read hundreds of books. But I think the family dynamic was very realistic. She also has a niece who is very much, you know, teenage from the time and doesn't seem to be experiencing trauma, right? Raised by her aunt. Yeah, who's, I think, normal as you can be. So overall, I highly recommend any Black woman to read this book. I mean, anybody who likes stories about families to read this book, or growth, watching someone evolve, because it's not quite resolved at the end, but the therapy part, when she does end up going to therapy, I thought the therapist described was great. The way she supported her through, you know, teaching her coping skills, like deep breathing techniques, and helping her talk about difficult things that she hasn't talked about before, I thought was a great representation of what therapy is like and how it's usually not fun, right? I describe for my clients, it's often a very painful, emotionally painful process to go through therapy and to do the work and to show up every week and have these very hard conversations, and then to go about making changes in your life, like saying, I'm not gonna keep having sex with strangers. I'm not gonna self-sabotage myself by not showing up to work on time. I am gonna take pride. I am gonna live somewhere that I can afford, right? Because she also had an issue with money. Everything was just a mess. Everything was a mess before she met this, you know, boyfriend of hers. But I think when you have loved, and then you've lost that love, and you felt like the love had sustained you in a way that you didn't even know you could be sustained. When you lose it, you think you lose a part of yourself. You don't. You think that, but you don't lose a part of yourself. I think you've ignited a newer, more learned part of yourself, and you've invited an opportunity to engage in a lot more self-love versus the self-hate that Queenie was doing. I do recommend the book. All of that to say, I recommend the book. I read it so quickly. It really captivated me and held my attention, and I knew I wanted to share it with you all. I'll also be featuring it, maybe. I'm reading a lot of books this month. I might feature it as my book of the month. I might. I don't know. We'll see. You'll see. It'll be in the community post. Let me know if you've read the book, what you think. If you have any questions about Queenie, why they call her Queenie, they talk about that in the book too. I don't think I've spoiled any of it for you. I think it's really, really a good read. So go get the book and like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel for more videos like this where I blend race, mental health, womanhood. And thank you for watching.